joining me now on the show is Philip Macalister from landlord.co.nz. Phil, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Don. It's great to be here.
Tell me, how long have you had the landlord.co.nz website and also the New Zealand Investors magazine?
So we started the New Zealand Property Investor magazine about 12 years ago now. The issue which we've just put out is issue number 163. So we've written a lot of words about property investment over the years. Landlords is a bit younger, but they both target the same audience, which is residential property investors, and they're an audience which are actually pretty active. Yeah.
And I recall, I think I did advertise in your magazine. So these magazines are available to be bought at the magazine stores?
Absolutely. So so a lot of the supermarkets, petrol stations like the BPs, the bookshops like Whitcoulls and stuff, they all stock the magazine. It comes out on the first Monday of every month, so regular as clockwork. We come out every Monday, 12 times a year. And we also have a bunch of subscribers, so if you don't want to pay $9.95 every month for it in the shop, you're better to subscribe and you get a bit of a discount.
Okay, and what sort of content is in the magazine?
Yeah, we try to mix it up, so we have a lot of statistical stuff, so property investors love to learn about rents and yields and what's happening there. We run a lot of features, so like any of the big issues which are out there at the moment, and you know, one of the ones which we hear quite a lot about is, you know, meth, for instance. So we'll write a lot of stories about that. So it actually helps the property investors understand, you know, what they should be doing with their insurance policies and those sorts of things. We run a bit of technical content. So, you know, lawyers and accountants and those sorts of people who are giving some good advice to investors about, you know, what they should be doing. The key role of the magazine, and when we sit there and we put it together each issue, is to actually deliver content to people which will actually make them better property investors.
Do you report right around the country or just in the Auckland region?
I always say that, you know, the centre of the property investment universe is Auckland, but there's also a hell of a lot of people outside of Auckland who invest as well. We certainly have, there's certainly a bias to Auckland because it's just so big, and there's more investors up here, but we live in Rotorua. We actually run the magazine out of Rotorua, and for instance, we have a lot of Aucklanders buy houses down there. They probably just like to come down for a holiday too. Right.
So Phil, what's different between landlords.co.nz and New Zealand Property Investment magazine? What's the difference between the two?
So with the website, landlords.co.nz, that has a lot more of the newsy type information on it, but also has a lot of data, so you can go in there and you can look at house prices and you can do graphs of, so if you wanted to pick a suburb in Auckland and you wanted to see 3-bedroom houses, you could graph how the rentals have gone over the last 10 or 20 years. So you've got a lot more interactive tools you can play with. The magazine is what we call where we go behind the headlines and we dig into the news stories in more detail.
So if you want more nitty-gritty, you've got to buy the magazine.
Yeah.
You can't give it all away for free, can you?
No, well, you get the website for free, so you're getting a pretty good deal.
See the investor behaviour. If they live in Rotorua, they buy in Rotorua, or they could buy in Wellington, Christchurch, or Christchurch, people buy in Christchurch, or they invest outside town.
A really good question, Don. A lot of people only buy in the areas they live in, but then you do have Aucklanders will actually buy outside of Auckland, partly because, you know, I guess the market here in Auckland is quite difficult at the moment for investors. You'll find, you know, you won't find an Aucklander, for instance, buying properties in Invercargill. That doesn't really happen, but you might get people in Dunedin will buy in Invercargill, and they're also quite similar markets because they have big student populations, which is a good example there. But people tend to buy in the areas they know. How
do you see the investor behaviour now on apartment? Because what's to say, like in 1994, there's only sort of like 400 apartments in Auckland. Now there's like 35,000 people living in Auckland, and even more to come. How's that investors' behaviour towards a market of apartments?
Oh, we ask them that question quite regularly, and a lot of them are actually investing in apartments. And you know, you've been through, you know what it's like with the property cycle. You go through different times, and you know, you've had some great opportunities to buy apartments in Auckland. You're getting more and more people living in apartments, so that makes them, you know, more attractive to investors. And you know, you've seen some really good yields and stuff in that apartment space as well. So I firmly believe that it's an area that property investors should be much more focused on. Some people, you know, they like their they're old wooden houses, but, buying in apartments, got some really good merits, I believe.
Well, 7 years ago, look, I refused to sell apartments.
Really?
I refused to believe in apartments. 7 years later today, I sold the most apartments. And I see the capital gain. 7 years ago, an apartment in Auckland City was averaging 200,000. Now it's going to 550 to 600.
But, 7 years ago, apartments were still quite new and people didn't quite understand them and where they fitted in. I think apartments now are becoming much more mainstream, and we've actually done a couple of magazines just about apartments, just standalone magazines about apartments, and they've been actually really popular. And the other thing which is really interesting there is, 7 years ago, Auckland was probably the only place you had apartments. I mean, now, you've got quite a lot in Wellington, you've got places happening in Tauranga, we've even got some in Rotorua going on at the moment.
I think it's all about education, the investor or the consumer to say, you invest in an apartment, they try it, they see the capital gain, but now the population increase, they see the demand, they understand it better.
Yes, yeah. And, an apartment is actually quite a good stepping stone to get onto the ladder as well with some of the apartments which are available.
Yeah.
One of the things that we've found with the magazine is it's been a really important tool for people to actually get involved in property, and I've got lots of stories of people who basically knew nothing about it, but once they started to read the magazine and understand what was going on, they ended up becoming investors themselves.
Where do you see the investors on 10 or 20 houses or even 30 houses, which is quite an achievement? What are they doing right now? Are they sitting on a fence, are they selling, getting rid of their old stock, replaced with new one, or are they quite happy where they are?
Or a lot of the guys with the big portfolios are tending to be just sitting there at the moment. They're not necessarily as active in the market in terms of buying. Those people will always be looking at their portfolios because they're essentially professional property investors. The market breaks into sort of three segments. You have a group who have, 1 or 2 properties, then there's another sort of big group who have around 5 or 6 properties, and then way down the end there's this group of people who have 10 plus, and that's actually a growing part of the property investment picture at the moment.
Right. And where do you see the interest rate right now? Where's it heading? Upwards?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. We've been through the bottom of the cycle. We've had probably the cheapest money that you and I will ever see in our lives. I don't think we'll see those sorts of interest rates again. They're still really low historically, but they're creeping up, and the banks are playing an interesting game at the moment. They're just doing little rises every couple of weeks now, rather than the big 25.
What the majority of the investor with the big portfolio, would they fix for 2 years? Would they fix portion of it?
They tend to fix, and all the research shows that you're actually better to fix 1 and 2 years and just keep rolling over your 1 and 2 year fixes. And a lot of property investors use interest-only loans.
Right.
Yeah.
As Kiwis, we must be mad in properties because, we got 4 million or 4.5 million population, Auckland 1.5 million going to 2 million. How come we absorb so much property, so much apartment compared to the Australians, for example? There's so much around and they're not as investor hungry as we are?
That's a question I don't actually think I know the answer to. I think part of it is that New Zealanders are quite conservative and they like that bricks and mortar type approach to investing, and property has treated investors very, very well in New Zealand over as long as I can remember, and you look back into the statistics, and it has been a great investment. We're not, compared to Australia, we don't buy as many shares. Like Australia has more of a share market investing culture than New Zealand does. But New Zealand, we certainly like property, and I'm always surprised at all these people I come across who I find out are property investors, and they're just ordinary people, teachers and doctors.
Well, I met exactly that couple yesterday. They had about 12.6 million of property value.
Really?
Their debt to ratio is about, I think their loan is about 4.6 million. So they got something like almost 8 million equity. Yeah. He works 3 days a week. She doesn't work anymore, look after their full portfolio. They want to get ahead even more. But I said, look, if you do nothing now for the next 10 years, you're set.
Absolutely.
So that is a huge achievement.
Oh, and, it's amazing how much equity people have in their properties. It's huge. One of my other hats I wear as the president of the Rotorua Property Investors Association, and And that's a fascinating group of people, and all the associations are, because it's just a whole mix of different ethnicities, but also different wealth, or jobs, if you like. Some might be blue-collar workers, others might be, professionals and stuff. But what distinguishes a property investor from a lot of other people is that they're prepared to get off their butts and go and make, do an investment and make some money and be prepared for their retirement. And that's what makes them different.
Well, I'm looking forward to pick up on your magazines and wood calls and read all about the latest information. I'm looking forward to have you back on the show.
Thank you. Maybe we should have you in the magazine on the cover one day.
Why not? Thank you for coming on the show, Phil.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Well, that's it for another week. We're looking forward to see you again next week with more guests and property to share. Until then, make sure your business is working for you and don't be afraid to take action.